Hello, in this video we are going to work on the player script. What we're going to do is make a script that has a public function in it that the guards can call when the player gets too close to them. So if a guard detects that the player has gotten too close, the guard can call that function in the player script and it's going to put the player back at the start. This is actually my second time making the script. The first time I introduced, there's a mistake in it because of a change in Unity, and I have to go back and do it a second time. So if you see things in this project that are working that you don't have working in yours, don't worry about that. It's just that this video was made out of order. So let's delete this script that I've got here, and I'm going to make a brand new one. I'm going to make a new, right-click on a blank area. I'm going to make a new C# script, and I'm going to call it player. And double-click on it to open it in Visual Studio. And then we'll think about what has to go in that script. So one of the things that we know is going to have to go in there is a start location for the player. So when the guard sees the player, he says, "Hey player, you've been spotted," and the player has to say, "Okay, right, I go back to my start position." And that means that the player has to store the start position. So here we are in Visual Studio, and we've got a start function and our update function. This is what is given to us by default. So up here at the top of the file, let's add a start location for the player. So in Unity, a location is a vector3 object. A vector3 is just a kind of a group of 3 variables that store an x, y, and a z, or an x direction, a y direction, and a z direction. So let's make a vector3. And I'm going to call it start position, and I'm not going to set it yet. So where am I going to set it? I'm going to set it here in the start function. So when the player starts up, the player is going to store its position in this variable. So I'll say start position equals. Now how do I know where the player is? Well, if I pop it over to Unity, you remember every object has a transform, and every transform has a position. So the player's transforms position. So our transform dot position. So now we have saved our start location. Save our start location. Awesome. Now let's make a function that puts us back at our start location. So let's make a function called restart. And all it's going to do is put the player back at the start position. So let me just write out to the console, putting player back at the start. And then how do we actually do that? How do we put the player back at the start? And this is where I goofed up before. Before I was just changing the player's transforms position, and that works for every other object except for objects that have a character controller, like the player does. So that used to work in Unity, but now it doesn't work anymore. So we have to do it a slightly different way. So we actually have to move the character controller component. However, we have to disable it, then move it, and then re-enable it. And that will move the player. We can't just sort of say, go to a new location. That won't work. So how do we get the character controller component on the player? So if I find the player here, just to show you, where's our FPS controller? You'll see that our FPS controller here has a character controller component on it. I want to get that component and disable it, and then change its position, and then re-enable it. So how do I get that component? I use the getComponent function. So I'll make a variable that stores a character controller. I'll call it C equals get component of type character controller. There you go. So now I have got a reference to the character controller component on the player, and now I just want to disable it. How do I disable it? Well, let's look through the IntelliSense here. It's got a flag on it, or a variable in it called enabled, and let's just set that to false. And then now we can actually put the character controller somewhere else. So let's see what's in this character controller. See, the character controller actually has a transform, and that transform has a position, and that we can put back at our start position. And then we can re-enable the character controller. So we'll set its enabled flag back to true, and that is enough to actually move the player. So what we have now is a function that can put the player back at the start location. Now we just have to make sure it gets called. So let's make a function, a public function that other scripts can see, and we'll call it spotted. So this is what we're going to call when the player gets spotted. And then we'll say debug.log player spotted. And then what do we want to do? Oh, I forgot to put a return type in here. Public void spotted. There we go. So what we want to do is call our restart function, but maybe not right away. Maybe we want the player to have a couple of seconds to look around and see which guard spotted them. So let's invoke our restart function in a couple of seconds. So we'll call the function called restart, and I don't know, we'll call it in 3 seconds, something like that. So when this is going to be called by the guard. Called by guard, G-U-A-R-D. So the guard will call the spotted function. The spotted function will say, okay, you know what? In 3 seconds, call the restart function, and in 3 seconds, when that goes off, the player will get put back at the start. All right, and then one last thing in here, the escape quit. We always want to make sure we can quit when the player hits escape in case we are not running in windowed mode. So how do we check if the escape key is down? We could put this on anything. We could make a function called escape quit, throw it in our resources, and use it whenever we want, which would be actually an awesome idea. Let's check to see if a key is down, or the escape key is down. So how do we do that? Well, there's a class called input. Input has a function called getKey, and we can give it a key code to check. So we give it a key code for the escape key, keycode.escape. And if that is true, then I'm going to say application.quit, right? And this is just kind of, you got to kind of just know that that's one of those things that's good to memorize. Input.getKey, that's a good one to know, and application.quit. So if the escape key is down, just quit. So remember, update is running every frame, so every frame the game is checking, is that key down? If it's down, quit. All right, now before I wrap this up, there's a bug, a subtle bug hiding in here. And that's if the player is close to the guard is going to keep spotting the player, and it's going to keep queuing up the invoke function. So the invoke function will never run. The timer won't count down because it's going to keep getting reset. So what we actually need to do is we need one more variable. So let's go add that. Let's go up to the top here and add a Boolean variable called spotted. And we'll set it to false. So this is, has the player been spotted yet? And when the player is spotted, we will say if spotted is false, now queue up the reset function, and let's set spotted to true. And that way, the player will get spotted once. Spotted will be false, then we set it to true. So the second time the player gets spotted, like on the next frame, the player's already been spotted. So we're not going to re-queue the restart function. And then back down here in our restart function, let's go add another variable, or we'll set spotted back to false. There we go. All right. I kind of almost forgot that last little bit. So that would have created a bug where the player would not get put back at the start position because the timer would never count down because it would keep getting reset as long as the guard saw the player. So I think that should be enough. And then let's go make sure that our player actually has this script. There's our FPS controller. And let's make sure that our FPS controller has the player script. There is a player script on the FPS controller. Let's run it and see if it works. Now there may be some functionality in this that you don't have because, you see, I'm already at my end zone. And so don't worry about that. There's going to be some stuff in here that you're going to see that we haven't quite gotten to yet. Those will be in the later videos. And there's our guard. So let's go. There we go. So we've been spotted. putting player back at the start. You can see down at the bottom the debug message got printed out, and now I got put back where I started. I don't know why it says players within guard's field of view. Okay, I got to get rid of that message. That's in my guard script. We'll get to that later. However, one thing people will say, Unity is so slow. Unity performance is terrible. My game is running really, really slow. Logging will kill your game's performance. What you see here, spamming error message after error message to the console, will kill your game's performance. So if you are doing lots of logging like that every frame, don't. And your game will run much faster. So I am going to go find that message, which is in the guard script, and delete that. All right, but that should be enough to get your player to be spotted by the guard. If you need any help getting that to work, it's not working quite right, flag me down. I'll be happy to help you fix it.